Few people have been able to learn much about what actually took place in the frontline fighting of the World War. They have often asked about the war and have found few veterans who could talk about it. One of the chief reasons for this is that they had little or nothing to tell about the war. Approximately 4 million men were in service during the war. Half of these went to France, and of these, 500,000 were near the front. 10 men are required behind the front to keep 1 man in action. Service, supply, truck drivers, hospital workers, ambulance drivers, guards in the base ports, the replacement and casualty camps, many thousands of military police, artillery engineers, signalmen, aviators, mechanics, and endless more. Our division lost more men than any other former National Guard division, more men than any other organization except the 1st and 2nd regular divisions. Our regiment lost more men than any other regiment of our division, our battalion more men of any of the 3 battalions in our regiment, and our company more men than any other company in the battalion. Yet we had men who never saw a German who was not a prisoner. Some of our men were cooks, top sergeants, company clerks, supply sergeants, buglers, signalmen, kitchen police, the men who carried up the ammunition, the rations, cared for the wounded at advanced stations, buried the dead. Many were liaison men carrying messages from company to battalion. They fired and were fired at as we fought in towns, woods, and hills, but seldom saw targets at which they fired. Bombs and shells were dropped on them. They suffered from gas and most of the horrors of war. They were killed, but they weren't actually at the front. Men who were trained, as I was, scouting, patrolling, observation, sniping, who led patrols, reconnaissance, or combat, advanced guards, captured prisoners, put a gun out of action, held advanced posts, served as suicide squads when we were being attacked, were the men who actually saw war, and most of them are dead. While 125,000 American dead in France are not so many when divided among the million men who were at or near the front, it is a tremendous percentage when it is considered how few of these men were doing the fighting. More than 250 men in our company alone were killed. More than the original strength of the company lost their lives in France. They can't tell you the story. I was phenomenally lucky. So I will tell our story. We'll try to tell you something of what happened over there. There have been war books written by other men who were better writers than I, more fitted to place what they saw upon the printed page. But I don't believe a book about America's participation in the war has been written by a man who spent days, weeks, and months in intensive fighting at or in front of the front, as my comrades and I did. There is nothing particularly glorious or beautiful about this story. I have told it as well as I could, but have been able to give you only a faint idea of the conditions we encountered during the 5 worst days of any unit of the American Army experience in France. The 5 days of our Battle of Fismet. You could fully appreciate its horrors only if you were there. Never was a group of men harder pressed by superior forces of the enemy or more ill-equipped to fight off those attacks than we. No artillery support during most of the fighting, no trench mortars, no hand or rifled grenades, just a moderate amount of pistol, rifle, and machine gun ammunition. No food, proper medical attention, or the opportunity to bury the dead. Our men in that battle, the handful who held the front lines, covered themselves with undying glory. The telling of this story will give a better idea of what we did in France than other war books I have seen. It tells the unvarnished truth about how we lived, slept, hiked, fought, and died over there. Scores of my friends, the men I had lived with, trained with, fought with, had come to like and admire, died in the woods in France. It was only by a series of miracles, amazing escapes, that I did not die too. That I am here writing this book. I was young then, 19 years of age at the time of the Battle of the Argonne. I had been too busy to live, and because I had not found what a fine place the world can be, I did not mind particularly dying. I had no actual fear of death. 21 years ago, when we fought the Battle of the Argonne, I had 32 ugly blood boils on my body from eating a diet consisting mostly of meat and bread for some weeks. Boils which made me swear more than I have all the rest of my life, as I constantly scraped them on the rocky ground while digging a new hole to protect my body each time we halted. I had French itch and copious quantities of mustard gas, ugly burns which still leave their scars. 12 bullets left their mark on my person or on my equipment in the first short battle. I was one of 32 men of our 250 strength company who marched out of the Battle of Fismes. I was the only man to return of those who followed me on 5 patrols that I led in one day in the Argonne forest. I hope through this book, at least partially, to show the gruesome side of war, barred from the waving of flags, the bugles, bands, the cheering, to show at least part of the ugliness, filth, dirt, evil, immorality, and stink of war. Be sympathetic, but remain aloof. Be strong, prepared to protect our own country against any nation or combination of nations which may attack our homes, our democracy, our American way of living. If our country was attacked, the first hour would not pass before I would plan to enlist. And millions of other Americans would be in just as much haste to protect our wonderful country and our American way of life. So that's how he kicks this book off, kind of burning through the intro there. And I really liked the point that he made when he broke down the numbers and how many people go to war, but how many people are actually fighting. And it's a big discrepancy. It takes a lot of people to get bullets to the guy on the front line. Right. It takes a lot of people to get that person transported to the front lines. It takes a lot of people to keep that person fed. It takes all kinds of logistics and support just to get that guy through the door of a building where the enemy is. And I've talked about this before too. In Iraq, there was places in Iraq where there was bases in Iraq where it was basically like being in America. They had restaurants and Starbucks coffee and McDonald's and Burger King, and they had pools and movie theaters. I mean, it was crazy.
Is it where, like, how you mentioned, like Burger King, for example, does Burger King, the company, kind of make a deal with, the government and be like, hey, we want to supply Burger King?
Yes, I'm sure. And actually, I shouldn't have said McDonald's, because it was usually Burger King. They must be the ones that had the deal at the time.
Yeah.
So Burger King was there on base. And we would travel, though, to outstations where there's some Army unit. This is on my first deployment. We traveled to some outstation where there's some Army unit living out in the middle of nowhere, just totally desolate. Some Marine Corps unit living in the middle of nowhere, eating MREs every day. And like, there was a group we worked with one. I wish I could remember where they were to give them some credit. But they were out there. They were on 1 MRE a day, which MRE is meals ready to eat. It's a not a very good
Robust
thing to live off of.
Yeah.
And these guys were out there living off of 1 MRE a day. Dang. And you feel bad. You go out, we stopped. I think we had to stop at their base. We had to get some information, gather some intel. They knew some targets around the area. We went and talked to them, saw how rough they were living. We went out and hit our targets. Then we were driving back to our big base, where we had good food and, internet, stuff like that. I mean, it's amazing how good it can be. And that's what some people don't realize about the military is it takes a lot of support and logistics to keep the guys on the front lines, and not taking anything away from those folks that are doing that, because that's a hard job. And I've talked about this before, those logistics convoys in Iraq and Afghanistan, those things were hardcore and horrible, dangerous jobs to do. And so I'm not taking anything away, but if you want to say, okay, who went out and hunted down the enemy and got him, it's a much, much smaller group of people.
Right. So it's like individually, yeah, you got people who did that part of it, but collectively it's just this huge force, right, of people.
Yeah, it's a massive force, but and it's even more extreme because in World War I, the lines were very clearly drawn. I mean, you literally had trenches in the ground,
right.
And so if you weren't within range of the enemy attacks, I mean, maybe they could get some planes to you, but you would be living relatively safe, and that's his point. And then when you get a little closer to the front lines, yeah, you were going to get some artillery bombardment, but everyone had dug these nice holes in these trenches, so the guys that were actually invading German trenches, most of them are dead. Yeah, most of them are dead. It's one out of every 10 soldiers that was actually going forward to attack, and most of them are dead. I mean, you could hear what he just said. They took more casualties than the strength of their company was. So they had 250 guys. There was actually 1,000 guys in the company because they took so many casualties. Dang. That's why World War I is so horribly disturbing and scary to me, because like I've said before, there wasn't a tactics, your own tactical prowess wasn't going to help you. Your own personal skill set wasn't really going to help you.
Yeah.
You were going to get up, you were going to charge. And really, Bob Hoffman talks about this. I mean, he was just lucky. He was a great athlete, and he trained hard, and he was constantly trying to make himself better. I'm sure that contributed to it all somewhat. But hey, when he comes off the battlefield and he'd been shot 13 times, in the knees, his bullet holes in his canteens, that's just a miracle.
Yep, lucked out.